All right, something you are going to quickly understand about me is that I can change my mind on a dime. So, in the intro episode of this podcast, I said that I was going to be releasing a conversation that I had with my friend Jennifer Buchanan, the music therapist. And I have completely changed my mind. And I am now giving you a conversation between myself and Rachel Rose, who is the expressive arts practitioner at Workshop Muse, because she has a book coming out. And so I felt the need to promote her book and this conversation that we had some time ago about creativity, mindfulness, and taking care of ourselves. So keep listening.
I think this will make sense to any mom that hears it, but like I'm kind of in this spot where I'm like a little bit resentful. I set the tone for this, right? And like everything in this house. So it's like if I'm messing up or tired or just not my best self, I just watch the reverberations of that energy through my house all around. And it will just reverberate and reverberate and reverberate until somehow I resource myself enough to change the tone again, right?
That was a direct quote from Rachel Rose in our interview about motherhood, creativity, mindfulness, taking care of ourselves, and listening to that little voice inside, that little voice that is often ignored about what we need, what we think might support us, and some of the ways or the stories or the falsities that we tell ourselves that those things are not worth our time or our energy, and how we move from planning and conceptualizing some of the ways that we need to take care of ourselves or our creative urges or our self-expression, and how to make that part of motherhood, not an additional, not an extra, but how do we integrate the resources and that inner voice of knowing what we need into motherhood and moving with it instead of moving against it. Keep listening for all of the ways that Rachel and I have integrated creativity, mindfulness, and all things coping into the all-consuming role of motherhood. And today we have a very special guest, and I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Oh my goodness, you're going to make me introduce myself? I wasn't prepared for that. That's like the hardest thing for me to do. Okay, I will do this.
Spontaneous.
I can do it. I can be spontaneous. Okay, I'm Rachel Rose. I run a practice called Workshop Muse, which is all about working in mindfulness and creativity, expressive arts, bringing them all together. So I like to say I hang out at the intersection of creativity and mindfulness. And actually, Kayla and I have known each other for a little while now, just professionally through some of similar trainings and that sort of thing. So it is a joy to be here and to kind of share about this more formally, mothering, because we both have sat in a world of art therapy, expressive art therapy, mindfulness, that sort of thing, and have always been having huddled conversations on the side about what it's like to be a mom, doing all of this. So it's wonderful to be able to come and actually formally speak about mothering in this capacity. I have 3 children. I have a 12-year-old, I have a soon to be 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old as well too. So I'm in the thick of mothering while I'm in the thick of creativity and mindfulness and doing it for myself and supporting others. And yeah, that's where I'm at in this moment in time.
Awesome. That was a great introduction. Great spontaneous introduction. Love it. So let's start with, what is your mother load? What does it feel like? How heavy does it feel? Where are the pieces that you found some lightness,
Mhm.
in the 12 years that you've been a parent, and then more recently adding, the two younger ones?
Yeah. It's a good question around what is my mother load. I knew you were going to ask me that, and I was thinking about it even last week, and I was like, my mother load is really heavy right now. Like I'm in a particularly vulnerable spot right now, um, because of, I don't know, the pandemic. I think has just exacerbated everything for us. But I also think just I'm really like into that stretch of, like I said, my youngest is 3, and you can kind of ride things on overdrive for a bit. But that transition to having the third child for my family was just threw us for an absolute complete loop. We felt really stable with our 12-year-old and our and our second one, who's now 6. But man, when we had that third baby, it's kind of feels like it's just been a slow spiral of kind of change and descent into kind of chaos. And I don't know if this will, I think this will make sense to any mom that hears it, but like I'm kind of in this spot where I'm like a little bit resentful that like we have to set the tone, right? That like I'm like I set the tone for this, right? And like everything in this house. So it's like if I'm messing up or tired or just not my best self, I just watch the reverberations of that energy through my house all around. And it will just reverberate and reverberate and reverberate until somehow I resource myself enough to change the tone again. Right.
Mm.
So I feel like, I've been yelling more this last like week or two. I've been kind of shorter. I've been thinking. So if I'm not like super mom who's like, okay, I see that you're having a hard time. This is so hard. If I'm like, hey, come on, we're moving through this. Let's get this going kind of thing. I'm like, then they're replicating that back to me, right? And I'm like, oh, why do you have to mirror my worst qualities? Why do you have to mirror the worst? I start nice most of the time, but you will always mirror the one time that I didn't start
Mhm.
nice, right? So I'm like, see that dynamic happening, and somehow I feel like it's like that's part of the mother load is I'm like, it's still my job. It's still my job to change the tone, right? It's like when I'm tired, I still have to change the tone and the energy. So that feels hard right now.
Oh, wow. Yes, I can't even express to you in words how much that resonates in the
Mhm.
sense that um you're setting the tone, you're setting the rhythm and the pace and the tone and the timbre, in your house, the pitch level, like everything, if we want to go full metaphor into music, there is like you're yeah, that's all you. My mom often remarks how my house is very loud.
Mhm.
Being a single parent to a only daughter, she's like,
Oh,
she
yeah.
comes to my house with my two zesty boys, and she's like, "What is happening?"
Yeah. 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 Oh,
Yeah,
I have
and
the loudest house in Calgary, I'm sure of it. I'm like, I like if you were to check in with my neighbors, like my kids are lovely and wonderful too, but even
totally.
their like happy energy is like so like frenetic and high, right? Like even when they're happy, they're screaming, let alone when they're grumpy and they're screaming, right? I'm like, maybe we could just scream at one of those times and not all of those times, right? And the music metaphor is like the pace, like how quick it is and how the tone and the pitch and all of that, right? It's like I don't want to be, and it's not to say this is I think important too. It's like I have a I have a husband who shows up in every single way possible, right? Like I have a tremendously supportive, loving husband, and it's still on me. Do you know what I mean? It's like because you're the first responder, so to speak, because you're like the one who's home, it's like you can only support from afar so much, right? Like he's a teacher and so he's away, right? He's gone during the days kind of thing. And he's got his own stuff he's trying to work through too, right? So it's like when you're like, yeah, I'm the maestro here, right? He's like my second that goes in. It feels like that. He would say, "Oh, come on, I do more than that." But I'm like,
Oh,
no, not
totally.
really. Like you, when
Yeah.
you're not home all the time, you're not, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that, if we want to go into the energetic exchange, between you and your kids, and just the like just the physical biology, that they've done research on in terms of how a mom's body changes and how a kid's changes and how they still feel that energetic connection. Like the part of the brain that lights up in the infant when the mom kisses the baby, not
Yeah,
anybody else, right? Like
yeah,
there's a literal like biological component to that, yeah, we can anecdote it and we can narrate it in such a way that's like, yeah, I feel this and I can see it having a ripple effect in my life. Like when I'm in a crappy mood, I can see it, right?
yeah,
And that mirroring of your worst qualities, but it doesn't always work in the reverse, right? Like
yeah,
you can be as regulated and as cool and collected as much as you want, and your kids are going to still flip their lids,
yeah,
right? Like it doesn't
yeah.
always work in the reverse. And so there is this kind of weird internal conflict that we can have around owning
that part of the relationship exchange.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think that's part of what my creative mindfulness practice helps me with, right? Is I feel like it helps me know when I'm in that, right? It helps me see that. It gives me perspective around that, right? So, and then also it helps me to hold a space for me sometimes to recalibrate, right? So whether or not they're going to flip their lid or not, or have difficult days or not, is irrelevant because they are going to, right? And so uh the agency or the choice for me as observing it, supporting it, the energy I want to hold, like that's really been just the only kind of life raft, the only thing I've been like, I can't imagine not having that skill and that resource bank to
Mm.
draw from at this particular time in parenting right now, because I'm struggling, right? And so for people to hear that, like, yeah, because I know people will be like, you like look about things or know things about, and they'll be like, oh, well, she's got it so together and her kids are probably, it's like, no, I don't have it together at all, right? I don't have, I have a, I have a beautiful practice that supports me to stay connected to myself and connected to the moment and find stillness when I can. I have this like well of a resource, but it still is the suffering, the hardness, it's all still there too, right? It's just that I don't feel as done to by it, right? I feel a sense of trust and patience in it, and it helps me um remind myself that I'm playing like a long game here, right? With my kids, I'm playing a long game. This is a moment in time. It's fleeting, that sort of thing. So I like, thank God that I can sit down and do some art journaling, or that I have, people that follow me know I do textile work, embroidery, that sort of thing. Like my embroidery is just like, it just feels like this big deep breath that I take because it's so slow. It's such a slow art form and it's so intentional. And when my house is screaming and there's like fever pitch chaos around me, it's like I have this little hoop. It's like I actually feel like the hoop for my embroidery sometimes when I sit down with it. It's like this like kind of whoosh, like I just kind of
Mm.
zoom into it and it's like a little circle of stillness, right? That I can kind, even when things aren't working and I'm like, oh shoot, I got to cut that stitch out or whatever, it still feels like this little time kind of holder for me, right? So which is maybe why I've been more stressed lately, because I haven't been creating as much lately over the last few months. And I have like a hoop I put up and I put it away a while ago and I haven't picked it up. And I've been playing that game in my head where I'm like, I need to create, like I need, like but what's hard, and I talk about this in my practice with people, is that we know that art or creativity or whatever tool it is that you're using, exercise or those, we know it's good for us. And so but sometimes we need to like not force ourselves into it. So we really have to know, like, is this the right time for me to like sit down and create? Or am I just doing this as like a checklist thing? And actually what I need to do is just go lay in my bed for a while. Right. So there's like a real sense of like knowing yourself and knowing that line of like, do you need the push or do you need to rest, kind of thing. And so
Mm.
that's a hard line for people to figure out. But I'm in the place right now where I keep hearing it in the back of my head where it's like, Rachel, you haven't been creating. You've just been doing stuff for other people. Maybe you need to sit down and do it. And then I'm like, but I could also just sit here and
Mhm.
just, go on my phone or whatever, all the
Yeah.
little devices that we have to like. So yeah, I do know that that's maybe why I'm not as well in this moment in time, is because I haven't been creating.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned in that little dialogue about resourcing. Can you give some context about what that means for you in your life?
Yeah, I mean, my resources are like, they're my things, right? That's like, it might not be the same for other people, but the resources that I have, like I remember probably not long after my son was born, my oldest, who's 12 right now, like having this kind of like, I think it was journaling or something, and I was like, these are the things I need. These are the things I need
Mm.
every day to like feel well, right? To ground myself, right? And just thinking about energy as we talk about things, it's like you think about electrical outlets, that sort of thing. It's like we have energy that needs to ground itself, right? So for me, resources are things that ground me, right? And making art in a mindful way would be the biggest resource I have, because nobody, I'm not judging myself how I show up to that practice, right? It's just about sitting down and making something, whatever that may be, right? Making art in a way that maybe I have like a vision around how I want it to go. I'm like, oh, I'd like to take a class or do that sort of thing. That's like a resource that gives me something outside of motherhood, right? Where you feel like you're building skills and techniques, and you get some like, yeah, anytime you learn something new, there's like a energy or a joy that kind of comes with it, where you're like, I'm figuring this out, I'm kind of doing something new, right? So that for sure too. And then like for me, writing is always something that is really, I tend to do a lot of like either writing poetry, or I'm writing a book right now just about expressive arts too, but it is also, the way I'm writing it is it's part memoir as well too. So there's a real creative aspect to that type of writing. And then being outdoors is like, I have to go outside every single day I can. If I like, that was what was so terrifying for me during lockdown. I was just like, but we'll be able to go for walks, right? Like I don't even know what would happen for me if I couldn't go outside. So then what happens for me, and this is just who I am, is there's like like even in the outdoors, like art making is something I do in the outdoors. Like, yes, I hike or I cross country ski, that sort of thing, but I also make art in the outdoors as well too. And like I said, even I'm writing a nonfiction book about creativity, and I'm like, but it's gonna be creative, right? Like I'm allowed to put poetry in there, right? So that's me, right? And for other people, it will be like exercise or cooking, or like other kind of things. But that resource bank that I have, those are like kind of my practices that I have to go to, right? And I think about those practices as, for me, they don't, like it's a really private world that you go to. It's a really internal space where you can kind of go inside and go deeper inside. And yeah, I can share that with, like, I can sit down and create with somebody, or I can go outside with my family or whatever, but it really is still an internal process. And that's where the resourcing comes from, right? And so I have to be really intentional. And actually, that's been what's really great about my husband lately, is he can see how I've been struggling. And he's the one who said, who's like, are you sure, like, you're okay? You haven't made anything in a while, right? Like, he knows me well enough to know, like, like, or should you be making something? And I'm like, I maybe, I don't know. I'm kind of like, so it's nice to have somebody to talk through with that too. And so then there's like, we were just talking about this before too, like in moments like that, there's my husband and I, he makes stuff too. He's a creator as well too. And so we are always taking care of each other, and we'll notice times where it's like, you can see your partner's stress level rising, and you're like, you're not doing those things to take care of yourself. So for us now, the way it looks is we support each other to go to bed as early as we can. This is our new thing that we've realized, is we're too tired after we put the kids to bed. There's no way to expect we're going to do anything after bed is kind of a setup, right? So we battled that for years, thinking like, oh, I should go paint, but being like, I'm so tired, I don't want to paint. So now we're like, I'm going to bed with the kids. I will snuggle with you and fall asleep, and I'm going to get up wicked early while everyone else is asleep, and that's my time. So I support my husband to get up early in that time, and he does his art practice, and I do my art practice, and then we get up at like 5, and our kids get up at about 7, right? So that gives us like 2 hours to like do the things we need to do to privately resource ourselves, right? So that we're ready for the day. So that's kind of our current little rhythm we have, but that will likely change at some point again. But
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I'm on the opposite end spectrum in terms of, my kids get up sometimes between 5 and 7.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah.
there would be like, just to give some context for everybody listening, in terms of like knowing your own circumstance and your own rhythm and your own schedule. And my kids like to snuggle. And so there's like big feelings if I'm not in bed when they wake up. I've tried.
Right.
I've tried to do the things in the morning.
Yeah, take away. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have to be able to do the things. If I'm going to get up before them, I have to be able to do them in bed. So that limits like journaling, meditating, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because they're awake really early. And my husband's a shift worker. And for those of you who've been listening for a while, that I mention it a lot. So I solo parent, I have these chunks of time where I solo parent the majority of the waking hours.
Right.
And then I do bedtimes on my own when he's working nights. And so it's a real shift in terms of my expectations of myself, because on those days I have to drop everything. Like
Yeah.
in that 4-day stretch, I I don't have expectations other than just to parent and
Right.
maybe get my work done like during the day when they're at their places, if they can go to their
Yeah.
places. Um, because it's a no-go situation. So, on a,
Yeah. Yeah.
in a perfect, schedule rotation, my husband woke up from his night shift yesterday at about 1, and that's quiet time in our house. We facilitate quiet time every afternoon. That is like
Yeah.
my worst time of day for me to parent, and because they're such early risers. So anyway, I said, he woke up and I was like, I'm going to bed, don't bother
Yeah.
me. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm leaving. I don't care what you do.
Yeah.
You don't ask me what I do. I'm going to go be on my phone, or I'm going to read, or I'm going to lay down and have a nap, which I did all
Yeah.
three of those things yesterday. But don't bother me. Like,
Yeah.
don't even think about it. You are
Yeah.
capable human beings. You take care of it.
Yeah.
Um, and so
Yeah. I think the trick is being intentional though. Don't you think the trick is like, it's like for me, it's like if I'm gonna, because I'm just thinking even back when my oldest was, nap time, right? Like it's
yeah,
like that's you're like, okay, I've got like an hour and a half
two
or an
things.
hour. What am I gonna do? And I remember, I mean, first when like this was a long time ago, but my son, I would be like, okay, I should clean, I should do all this stuff. And then I was like, what? I don't want to do like I don't want to do any of that, right? So then it would be like, if I have an hour and a half, like what will I do during it, right?
Mhm.
And that, you know what? I finished my master's when my oldest was young. Like those. I really had a desire to do my education at that point too, and so I entered my master's and finished my master's during that time. And then I was like, hey, done some training. Felt like the boost of like what I accomplished in those times, right? And then with my other kids subsequently later on, like my middle child, like I remember that's when I started to write, where I was like, okay, he's sleeping next to me, like I have this impulse to like write, and so I would write, or um, making art or my embroidery. It's like I have to be thoughtful about like not having my phone nearby, because that is the device that will just like suck you into the black. We call it the scroll hole in our house, where you just keep scrolling down this hole and you can't get yourself out. Like I have to put that away. I have to find, and I have to be like, I have to make a plan sometimes, right? About
Yeah,
like, if I have even like 30 minutes, what would be the thing I should do during that 30 minutes that will
yes.
nurture me, right? And so, and again, and then you got to push yourself. And if you find you can't push yourself, then that's probably when you need some help, either from somebody who loves you to be able to like support you. Because, we get to places where we're like, I can't even imagine making myself
Yeah,
go for a walk or do whatever I know will nourish me, right? So
yeah,
but I think being intentional and making the intention to be intentional is kind of half the battle, really, right?
yeah, yeah. When before pre-COVID, right when we had our second um, son, he was born about 8 months before the first March lockdown.
Okay, yeah,
And so, and then we were home together for 90 odd days in the first lockdown. But before that, when I would be at home with the kids and my baby was a baby, I would have to be like, okay, so I know the morning is going to be chaos, and in the afternoon, we're going to have quiet time. And so, what am I going to do to nourish myself? Because I don't have help all day.
yeah,
Um, and so I know that I need to make this little widget of time to do something for me. And often that was just having a sleep. Like I couldn't get much further than like, I'm just going to fall asleep next to you while you watch your movie while your brother's napping.
yeah,
Um, but other times it was, sitting there journaling, or, doing a little bit of art with him, and then, moving into the real quiet time, like movie
yeah,
time. Um, but it all had to be pre-planned. Like it wasn't something, the things that nourish me aren't always that great done like spontaneously, right? Because if it is kind of spontaneous and I have that 30 minutes, it's like I could go through 10 or 15 things that I could do, right? Would doing the dishes make me feel better? Folding a load of laundry, um, preparing supper, doing some journaling, doing some writing, doing something creative, resting,
yeah,
connecting with a friend, like what is that thing in those 30 minutes? And I think that's where right now, I feel like we get stuck in the doom scroll, right? The like, what is this person doing? And what is this person doing? When you're getting stuck in that place, or when you're repeating that kind of self destructive or self sabotage kind of pattern around, like, I'd really like to do this thing, but I'm going to just like lose myself in social media, or I'm going to prioritize laundry or dishes, which in some circumstances is what
Yeah.
you need.
Yeah.
But just that, like, being really intentional around that time. And oh, I was coming back to my other point about how you mentioned like getting in the resource for help,
Yeah.
right? And
Help.
whether that's like formal support, or like I have a friend who asks other friends to like make her a lasagna or something. She's like, I know you want to help me in this moment, so here's my list of needs. do
Yeah.
you
Good for
feel
her.
like do you feel like picking one off this list for me? And then if they don't, they don't. That's like a whole
Yeah.
nother
Yeah. Yeah.
conversation. But if a friend texted me tomorrow and was like, hey, I've got a really busy week, the kids are doing this, I'm doing this, like, can you make a meal for me? I would be like, yeah,
Yeah.
I would, because we can't go for coffee right now.
Yeah.
So I would love to make
Yeah.
you something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Mhm.
So yeah, it's interesting how we can pigeonhole ourselves. And circling back to what you said around like telling yourself some falsities, is like we can tell ourselves all kinds of stories, like, she's busy, she won't help me, she's got kids, she's
Yeah.
this, she's that,
Yeah.
right? And oftentimes, that feeling you get when someone asks you for help,
Yeah.
like, and you're like, yeah,
Like, you want me? Yeah, I
you
know.
want
Hey, it's
me?
true. And it's a different energy to make a lasagna for your friend than make a lasagna for yourself. It totally is. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 And so it's really interesting how we can ask for support in those ways. So um tell me one thing, because you said you're struggling a bit this week. Let's create a bit of an accountability. What is one thing you're gonna do this week for yourself?
I'm gonna finally pick up and just off of my embroidery hoop. Even I just in the moment when I
Yeah.
just was like, oh, and then I pick up my hoop and it's whoosh, and I was like, but I haven't done that in months. Like I've
Mm.
got and I've got a project. I've got two projects downstairs that are just sitting there. They've just been sitting there since like July, right? Like I'm like, oh, it's summer, it's too busy, but that's what I'm gonna do because I know, and I've had that little niggling thing in the back of my head. I was sitting out on my patio the other day, and I was like, I should be embroidering, and then I was like, nope. I'm gonna go sweep the floor, right? Like I was like, so nope. I think that's what you can give me the nudge towards is like check back with me and see if I've been embroidering.
Awesome. Okay. We are going to close our conversation today with 5 rapid fire fun questions. And
Oh, wow.
so you're going to share with me your first thought when I ask you these, okay?
Okay.
What is your favorite art medium?
Embroidery. Yeah, textiles. Yeah.
What is sitting on your end table right now in your bedroom?
A pile of books. A handmade art piece made out of sparkles that's a smiley face and a broken phone. And I'm in my room right now. So there you go.
Awesome. What is the last bit of screen that you watched? A TV, a movie, a YouTube video?
I just watched all the Hunger Games with my son. He read through the books, and so I'd never read the books or anything. So I watched all the movies. We just finished it last night. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What is your favorite part about what you do for work?
Oh, that's a great question. My favorite part. There is like okay, I'm gonna try to say this succinctly. There is a knowing that happens when we create. There is a knowing of ourselves when we create in with intention and kind of presence that like a muscle, a part of ourselves where we learn to speak in different ways, speak through shape, line, color. Like it feels like Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz, where she like clicks her heels together, or not even clicks her, but when she moves from like into the black and white to the technicolor, and you're like, the world's like this. That's it. The moving towards knowing through expression sounds kind of heady, I know, but like that's what we're doing. It's like we can know through our brains, we can know through our minds, but there's so many other ways to know, like indigenous knowing and animals' ways of knowing. Like we don't even know, like most of us don't even think about those other ways, right? And so art is a way of knowing. It's a way of knowing ourselves. It's a way of knowing the world. And that the more, every time I like get to be in that or get to watch somebody else do that, I'm like, it feels a little bit like magic.
I would agree. I 1000% agree.
Mhm.
And what are you grateful for?
Right now, I'm grateful for just the safety that I feel in my home and with my family right now. And I don't feel under threat in any grand way. So I'm thankful for that because I know a lot of folks constantly feel under threat or don't feel safe. So,
Yeah,
mhm.
yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for being here with me and with us, the larger community who's listening. I really appreciate everything you've said today and every little gem that someone is going to hear or take with them into their lives. And so I really appreciate that. And I will be checking in with you to see if you've picked up
Yeah.
your embroidery hoop. So thank you very much for being here, and thanks everyone for listening. We will see you next time.
And that's a wrap for this conversation with Rachel Rose and I. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today on the Chill Like a Mother podcast. If you had an aha moment or found yourself saying, oh yeah, me too, maybe share this podcast with somebody who might appreciate it, a friend, maybe in your mom group or on Facebook. Episodes come out every Sunday to help you with those Sunday scaries. And subscribe so that you never miss an episode and you can carry me, Kayla, around in your back pocket. If you liked this episode, please leave us a rating or a review. I'd love to hear from you. And if you want to look at it behind the scenes and get exclusive ways to be more chill as a mom, follow me on Instagram at chill.likeamother. All of the mentionables are linked in the show notes, and always, this is not a replacement for professional advice, though we are professionals, we're not your professional, though we do encourage you to seek whatever professional supports you may need in your life. And in case you haven't heard it today, you deserve the time and the money that it might take for you to take care of yourself in whatever way you need taken care of. And real quick before you go, that book that Rachel talked about, it's done and it's out. You can pre-order it right now on Amazon if you're listening to this podcast when it was released. If you're listening to it afterwards, it's still available on Amazon. Have a relatively chill day and catch you in the next episode.